Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States now owes over $38 trillion, the highest figure in its history. The European Union carries around 14 trillion. Japan, almost 9 trillion. Even oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia or export powerhouses like Germany and China all owe enormous sums. But here's the paradox. If everybody owes money, who exactly is owed? This is the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Debt isn't just a burden. It's the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every boom and bust sits on top of this invisible scaffolding of IOU. And if you follow the chain of creditors long enough, you discover something unsettling. The world doesn't owe money to anyone in particular. It owes it to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we reach this point, a planet drowning in over $315 trillion of total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the global economy, we need to go back to the beginning. Centuries before the first credit card swipe or digital transfer, the idea of national debt was born not in Wall Street, but in war. In 1694, England was fighting France and running out of gold. The king turned to merchants for help. In exchange for a permanent stream of interest, payments, backed by future taxes, they financed the crown. To manage this new arrangement, the Bank of England was created. It was revolutionary. The state could now spend money it didn't yet have, and in return lenders received something priceless. A promise from the government, one that could be traded, bought, or sold. That was the birth of the government bond, the seed of the modern financial system. France copied it. The Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to fund its revolution and later its expansion westward. National debt became not a mark of failure, but a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow was the ability to rule. Empires once conquered territory to extract gold. Now they issued bonds to extract interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the world's dominant export. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan over $9 trillion. And global borrowing increases by the equivalent of $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country owes. Every bank lends. Every citizen through taxes, savings, and pensions is both debtor and creditor. But who exactly holds the other end of the rope? Let's start with the United States, because its debt isn't just national, it's global. Out of that $38 trillion, about half is publicly held, meaning owed to investors rather than to other parts of government. Roughly 2/3 of those investors are American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining 1/3, about $9 trillion, sits in foreign hands. Japan is the top holder with around $1 trillion, followed by China with about $800 billion. Then the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say the US is in debt to China, that's true, but only for roughly 2% of the total. Most of the debt America owes is to America. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes that fund interests on those bonds, which then flow into American retirement accounts. It's a hole of mirrors. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly a reflection of the same system. And this circularity isn't just American, it's global. Japan lends to the US through treasuries. The US lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank. Developing nations, in turn, lend back to advanced economies by parking foreign exchange reserves in Western bonds. It's a planetary game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Every country holds someone else's IOU. Every promise is secured by another promise. It's like a poker table where every player has borrowed chips from the next, and the only rule keeping the game alive is that nobody stands up. But there's a 4th layer, the most powerful of all, the markets themselves. Behind every government bond sits a web of institutions. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks, managing tens of trillions in assets. They are the true arbiters of credit. They decide which nations can borrow cheaply and which will pay a premium for survival. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, and entire economies can be restructured overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. And the ultimate market maker, the modern high priest of this system, is the central bank. Central banks don't merely manage debt. They manufacture it. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. The liability of one balance sheet becomes the asset of another. Every dollar in circulation represents a unit of debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every bill, every digital dollar has an IOU engraved invisibly on its surface. For decades, this loop has sustained itself through confidence. So long as investors believe governments will pay interest even if never the principal, the machine keeps turning. But what happens when confidence wavers? We've seen it before. In Greece in 2010, the government's debt became unpayable. Bondholders panicked. Yields spike. The European Central Bank and IMF intervened, but their rescue came with austerity. Tax hikes, spending cuts, and mass unemployment. For an entire generation, bailout became another word for sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, fuel shortages and political collapse followed when the government ran out of foreign currency to service loans. When the system breaks, the creditors suddenly become visible. The IMF, the rating agencies, the anonymous bondholders who hold entire nations by the throat. And yet, even after collapse, the same logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Old debts are restructured. The machine resets with a new name on the same balance sheet. That's because in the 21st century, debt isn't designed to be repaid. It's designed to be rolled over. Governments today don't actually plan to pay off their debt. Not now. Not ever. That's not a conspiracy. It's policy. When you or I take a loan, we're expected to repay the principal. But governments operate differently. They treat debt like a rolling subscription, issuing new bonds to pay off old ones. A process economists call refinancing.